It's so good to be with you here in Bell Hall. As you know, I'm still primarily living in Milwaukee and going back and forth, and every time I come, it's fantastic. This time has been particularly fabulous. I arrived in Royersford at an Airbnb on Wednesday afternoon and went for a walk and stumbled upon, at the end of my walk, a group of people gathered at, it's not a town square, but their little municipal area, and they were all having these little pride flags. So of course I stopped and was like, hey, what's going on? And they told me that they were having an inaugural pride celebration and raising a pride flag, which you can see here. So I stuck around and saw a fabulous ceremony, made some new friends, and took a little pride flag for myself. For me, that was particularly great because in Milwaukee this weekend, actually starting on Thursday, was the kickoff of the 3.5 days of Milwaukee's annual Pride Fest, which I've been going to since 1996, and I'm not gonna lie, a little fear of missing out to be missing that. So glad, though, that I stumbled upon that. And then, of course, Chris mentioned this already in her welcome. On Friday, I went to the Unity Shabbat at Beth Israel congregation. Yesterday to the March for Diversity and Unity, and it has just truly been a fantastic weekend to connect with the community here in Chester County. And I am grateful for that. I'm grateful to everyone who came out, pun intended. Thank you. A little slow roll there, that's okay. And as much as I am on a little bit of a high from all of those things, I actually also need to make some space for the grief that I know I'm feeling, the grief that I assume we are all feeling at the ongoing gun violence in this country. When I was here 3 weeks ago, the Buffalo shooting had just happened, and of course, since then, the terrible events at Robb Elementary School. And I can't keep count, everybody, because we can't keep count in America, but since that tragedy at Robb, there have been at least 20 more mass shootings, most of which just simply don't make the news anymore. And I'm holding the weight of the grief of all of that, and because it's Pride Month, I am also holding some other grief. The grief that the fact that trans Black women in this country are murdered at a horrifying rate. And last year alone, nearly 36 Black trans women were murdered with almost nothing being done about their deaths. I am holding the weight of grief for the fact that just in the first 6 months of this year, hundreds, and I mean literally hundreds, of anti-trans and anti-LGBTQ bills have been introduced in legislatures all across the country. And the fact that all of those things add up to an increased homelessness in LGBTQ kids, an increased risk of violence and death by suicide for them. I hold that grief all the time for a community that is part of me. And we need to talk about those things. We need to address those things. God knows we need to fix them. But for just a moment this morning, I would like to lay my grief for those things down and invite you to lay your grief for those things down and to embrace what all of my friends in Milwaukee have been doing all weekend, which is claiming their right to some joy. And so I want to claim a little joy this morning by introducing you to, and maybe you already know it, one of my favorite films that I watched for the first time more than 2 decades ago and have loved ever since, but I'm a Cheerleader. Some people I know have seen it, some folks watched it in preparation for this, but if you haven't, it's okay. I'm gonna give you my version of the plot synopsis this morning. But I'm a Cheerleader is actually a little satirical humor poking fun at the gay conversion movement. It was made in 1999 and features a very young Natasha Lyonne, Clea Duvall, and features prominently a fantastic performance by RuPaul, who shows up as an ex-gay. Natasha Lyonne's character is named Megan, and she is a 17-year-old high school senior, a cheerleader dating the captain of the football team. But her family and friends have grown worried because, you see, in the last few months, Megan has been experimenting with vegetarianism. She does not seem to really enjoy kissing her boyfriend, and she's got posters of other cheerleaders hanging in her locker. So they host an intervention and invite RuPaul's character Mike to come in, and they tell Megan that they are afraid, given all these signs, that she might be, and they do whisper this, a lesbian. Megan is, of course, shocked and keeps saying over and over, "No, I'm a cheerleader. I'm a cheerleader." But her folks, concerned for her, sent her away to a program called True Directions, which will teach young people how to become heterosexual. So Megan is sent off to True Directions, where she encounters a group of other young boys and girls about her age who've also been sent there by their families. Some of them, like Megan's parents, are loving, albeit misguided. Some have families that are brutal and on the point of rejecting them. The kids range from folks who welcome their time at True Direction because they want so badly to be normal, to kids who flat out say, "I'm just here to learn how to hide." Over the course of Megan's time at True Directions, she and the other kids are introduced to a curriculum that's going to help them, as the founder says, embrace their true, rightful gender identity and sexuality. This is, of course, presented as an absolute binary, and the satire in the film highlights this by having really stark colors, everything blue and everything pink. And the girls, of course, are the ones wearing pink, and they have to do prescribed, typical gender roles for women. They're seen scrubbing the floors and doing dishes and changing a baby doll diaper, where the boys in their little blue suits are out chopping wood and learning to work on cars. Yeah, it's as absurd as it sounds. The comments in the room are quite funny. But Megan, through the course of this, actually realizes that, as she says, "Oh no, I am a homosexual. I don't want to be one. I'm going to learn." She just embraces it. It's like, "I'm going to learn how to be straight." But, there's always a but. She meets Clea Duvall's character, a young girl named Graham, one of the people who's there to just learn how to hide. And the two of them develop a mutual crush. And we see them struggle with that as we see the other kids struggle in various ways to express who they are while trying to fit into these narrow confines that True Directions and our world force them into. One of my favorite scenes is when several of them sneak away to a gay dance club in their town. And it is the only time where they can get to be themselves. The whole scene harkens back to the roots of gay pride and liberation because, of course, it was the gay club scene, which was the only place that so many queer people in our history could gather to be safe and be themselves. There's a scene following in stark contrast to that bar scene, where the kids are essentially forced to protest outside the home of an openly gay couple. We later see that same couple welcome some of them in when the kids get thrown out of True Directions. And through all of that, we see Megan and Graham sweetly fall in love for the first time, have their first kiss, and their moments are tender and loving, and it is also fraught because they know and we know that they are not going to be accepted. As far as I'll go for now. I have to watch to see what happens. But as much as I love the film, there are things about it, I'm just going to say this up front, that are pretty dated. It was, like I said, made in 1999, and our language and understanding of queerness and gender and trans lives has fortunately evolved a great deal in the last 23 years. But there are plenty of things about it that are still sadly relevant. Gay conversion programs are still legal in many states. I have friends who have been harmed by them. I already mentioned the high rates of homelessness for LGBTQ kids, which the film alludes to. And despite marriage equality being legally protected right now, we know that that too is precarious. And in addition to those sobering realities, though, But I'm a Cheerleader offers through its satire 3 takeaways that when I watched it recently, by the way, wasn't planning to do this for my Spirit Flicks, just rewatched it because I loved it and went, oh, I have to do this. And here's why. It highlights the importance of comprehensive sexuality education, the importance of representation, and the importance of queering our norms. Now, for me, some of you know this, I am actually a trained facilitator for the OWL, the Our Whole Lives Sexuality curriculum that the UUA and the UCC developed and teach. We offer OWL here. And OWL is part of the reason I became a UU. And so I can never understate the importance of sex education, holistic, comprehensive, healthy sex ed. And the kids in True Direction, as I said, are given some sex ed, and y'all, it is bad, bad, bad. Not only do they reinforce an unhealthy and unrealistic gender binary, but they are just given outright wrong information. 0 information about their own bodies. They are told that the only real appropriate sex is heterosexual sex in a missionary position, and that foreplay doesn't matter. Now, that aside, the fact is, as ridiculous as it is within the film, that is, if kids in America are getting sex ed, kind of what a whole lot of them are getting. Sex ed in this country is woefully inadequate. It is often inaccurate and is usually sex negative. The filmmakers knew that in 1999, and they were absolutely making fun of it. They were making fun of the ways that misinformation harms people, the ways in which we conflate sex and gender, the ways in which we want to reinforce rigid gender roles. And the filmmakers show this over and over in all these many scenes of the curriculum these kids are forced to go through. But there is one scene that is particularly poignant to me that I want to share with you. One of the girls in the program is named Jan, and Jan is actually a Latino girl who is really, really masculine presenting, y'all. We'd probably call her non-binary now, although I would hope we would let her tell us herself who she is. But she is got a shaved head with just a little mini mohawk. She's got a little facial hair. She's super athletic. She likes sports. She is stereotypically masculine. And because of that, everybody in Jan's life, including her family, have just assumed that she's gay. And they've sent her there to cure her from her gayness. But in a group session, Jan finally has a breakdown. After trying so hard to be accepted and do the right things, she realizes it's never going to work, because here's the truth she says to them: I don't belong here because I'm not a homosexual. I actually do like boys. I do want to have sex with boys. And just because I'm masculine, and just because I like sports, and just because I'm not pretty, doesn't mean I deserve this. And she cries, and she gets up, and she leaves the program. The scene is depicted with a little bit of humor, a whole lot of sadness. And when I rewatched it recently, I actually also experienced a moment of wanting to cheer for her. This young girl who said, no, I am not going to let you tell me who I am. The OWL curriculum makes space for kids to learn, not just kids, by the way, grown-ups too can take it, to learn who they are in all the multifaceted ways they might show up to be human. There is a really great resource I got when I was an OWL facilitator. I think it should be our next slide. It's called The Genderbread Person. But I love this because what it does is that it helps us see the complexity of gender, identity, sex, and sexuality. So we have our identities, we have our orientations, meaning who we are attracted to. There's biological sex, or the sex we are assigned at birth. And there's how we perceive our gender, which is socialized, and how we choose to express it. And y'all, those are all different things. It's complicated, way more complicated than a binary. But a lot of us, many of us in this room, I'm guessing, grew up with just binaries. And it becomes hard and confusing to let go of those binaries because binaries make the world a lot simpler, a lot easier to navigate, but they also do a whole lot of harm. And it is literally life-saving to be able to provide the language for people to name themselves and own their own experiences. And that moment when young Jan runs away claiming her own truth is a moment that I've actually seen fostered in OWL classes. I can't tell you the number of kids when I facilitated OWL in my home congregation who said for the first time, I want to tell people in this room who I really am. That sense of being able to have the language to know and claim yourself, to show up as your authentic self, leads to the other critically important feature of the film that maybe goes without saying, but I'm going to say it, which is the importance of representation. Full disclosure, as I said, the film was made in 1999. If it was being made today, we would probably drag it for how not very representational it is. Almost everybody in the film is young, fit, mostly white, not all, but mostly white, able-bodied. You get my point. It's not showing a whole lot of diversity of bodies, but what it does show is a diversity of queerness. So there are kids like Megan who are cisgendered and femme-presenting, and there are kids like Jan who are absolutely not fitting that assigned gender role. There are boys who are awkward and nerdy, and there are boys who are flamboyant and love to dance. There are people who are closeted, and there is a fabulous gay couple that I mentioned who are in a long-term committed relationship. They are loving and kind, and we see them engage with each other in the most healthy, meaningful ways of anybody in the entire film. We see them grapple with the harm done to them, the harm that they did to others, and try to make up for it by being a refuge for rejected gay kids, being a chosen family. And the representation of that gay couple in 1999, not long on the heels of the devastating AIDS epidemic, was breathtaking in 1999. It was breathtaking in 2001 when I first saw it, and it is still kind of breathtaking today. And the brilliance of the satire is how the filmmakers skewer the notion that sex and gender and love are so rigid for some people, while showing two older, average-looking, white, middle-aged white dudes navigating relationship norms on their own terms and offering love to people who need it. And I don't know if you remember what mass media was like in the late 90s, but there were not a whole lot of positive images of gay people. Will and Grace wasn't popular yet. It was before the L Word and RuPaul's Drag Race and Queer Eye for the Straight Guy, before the Ellen Show. There was not a lot of places for any person who identified anywhere on that queer spectrum to see themselves in a positive, healthy, loving light. Actor Elliot Page, in 2 weeks, I started to say recent, but it was like in the last week and a half, did an interview with the Trevor Project, and Elliot Page actually named But I'm a Cheerleader, and some of the films that followed it, as instrumental in helping him as a young, closeted queer kid who didn't even know he was trans yet. Sorry. Elliot Page named this film as one of the pieces of culture that helped him know, I will be okay. There is a possibility for hope and love and thriving for me. Representation matters, y'all. Having access to accurate sex education, to language that helps you name your own self, and to being able to see yourself mirrored back at you in a variety of ways. I'll say it again, it's life-saving. But representation is important not just to the closeted queer kids or the openly gay people around you. It is important for everybody else because representation matters for the people who've been shoved to the margins so they can learn that they belong and are worthy of love. And it is important for the people who are doing the shoving. And it is a sad fact that we have to teach each other to see each other as human, but we do. And so representation maybe also in this film helps some straight kid go, oh, that queer kid in my school is okay. I can maybe stand up for them. I can maybe expand my understanding of what it means to be fully human and to make space for somebody else to show up as their authentic self. People are afraid of difference. We know this. It's why we showed up for that diversity march yesterday, to be a counter voice to all the people in our community saying difference is bad and it's scary and wrong. And I've heard justifications for all the people in their frantic, politicized, wanting to ban gay positive books, saying things like it's going to indoctrinate kids, as if we don't indoctrinate kids into heterosexuality from before they are born. We've all done it. Can't do it without breathing, right? We see a pregnant person, are you having a boy or a girl? We see a baby, and they have on a little onesie, and it says ladies killer or little princess. Before kids are born, we are teaching them what it means to be straight. And for any queer person to be able to show up in this world as themselves is a miracle, a subversive act to be themselves and go against those compulsory norms that wants to tell other people who they are. Things have changed a bit since the film was made, because not only can gay people be married now, so laws have changed, but some of our attitudes have as well. We're a little more willing to have the conversations about what a pronoun is, a little more open to broader representations of humanity. And studies have shown, and I apologize because I forgot to put what study this was, you can find it on the Trevor Project, that people under the age of 34 are far more willing to admit that gender is a binary. They understand that gender is not a binary. They understand there's a lot more flexibility in how we can express who they are. And so we've moved the needle on gender a little bit, moved the needle on accepting multiple sexualities a little bit. We started to have more open and honest conversations about how limiting our norms are. But we need to keep queering those norms. And let me clarify for you by borrowing the words of Bell Hooks by what I mean by queer and queering. Bell Hooks says queer, not as in being about who you have sex with, that's a dimension of it, but queer as in being about the self that is at odds with everything around it and has to invent and create and find a place to speak and to thrive and to live. As societies, as communities, as spiritual people of faith, we need to make space for people to speak and to thrive and to live, because if we aren't, all we are doing is reinforcing those harmful, racist, patriarchal, homophobic norms that limit all of us in our ability to be human. And y'all, we only have to look at the carnage around us on a near daily basis to know what happens when people internalize hatred and violence and spew it back out into the world. All those people opposing DEI efforts and supporting anti-trans legislation are afraid of difference, afraid of change. And you know what? They're right, though, because things are changing and things need to change. And that's why we have to stand up and say things are going to change, even if you're afraid, because the way things are is literally killing people. Queering our norms means that we ask questions about how we think the world should be. How did it get this way? We ask, who has power in this dynamic? Who benefits from this system? And how do we work together to change it? Queering our norms means that we as people of faith, we as neighbors, open our circles a little wider. It means that when we are uncomfortable about somebody's, I'll use this as an example, chosen name, when we aren't comfortable about the pronouns they want to use, when we aren't comfortable if our kid says, I'm non-binary or pansexual, and we don't know what those things mean, that instead of getting defensive or shutting down or rejecting or saying things like it's only a phase, that instead we listen, we sit in our discomfort, and we say, tell me more about that. Thank you for sharing your truth with me. Let me say a cheer for who you are. Let me welcome you home. It matters that pride flag is flying in Royersford this month, because while I'm sure there's somebody who's mad about it, I am equally sure that there are people taking a deep sigh of relief when they see it. There are people, and they might be 12, and they might be 20, and they might be 80, who are saying, thank God, somebody here is going to accept me. Somebody here is going to celebrate me. Pride, you probably know this, started as a protest, a riot at Stonewall in 1969, and sparked a burgeoning movement that had been going on all over the country at that point. 3 Black, brown, queer women picked up bricks and threw their fists and said, we are not going to accept the hatred and the violence anymore. And the pride parades that followed in the 70s were a commemoration of that first protest. They were a way of people to say, we are not going to be invisible and we are not going to be dead in this country anymore. It's called pride, everybody, because people said, we are not going to be ashamed of who we are. Pride. Pride is about showing up in the world in all the multiplicities and complexities and ways that it means to be fully alive. I mentioned that for the past 3 days in Milwaukee, our Pride Fest has been going on. And there is an area at Pride Fest that started a few years ago. It was started by a UU clergy and a couple of other interfaith folks. And they have a tent that's called Blessed at Pride Fest. And I wish I could show you the pictures that have been flooding my feed from Blessed at Pride Fest. But if you're on Facebook, you can go and search for Blessed at Pride Fest and see all the photos. The amount of joy. By the way, in 2019, I was there for it, and I can tell you the amount of joy for people who have been rejected by religion and told by people in their lives that God hates them, to have somebody in a clergy outfit say, you are loved. I can't even tell you. Just go look for it if you want some joy today. And if you want to go to a Pride Fest, Chester County Pride is next Saturday on the 11th in Phoenixville. But are you all... If Pride Fests and parades aren't your thing, then I want you to just, whoever you are, to show up in your full, authentic, everyday life. There's a meme that's been flooding my social media feed this week. What we think Pride is, rainbows and parades. It's so much more. It's euphoria. It's feeling at home in yourself. It's sex, yes, but it is also feeling free, surviving hardship, and my favorite one, boring everyday life. The gay agenda is sometimes going to the grocery store to cook some supper. I'm a Cheerleader, by its end, opens the door for its characters to be fully claiming everything on that bottom. To be claiming some joy. And in these days where we are all carrying so much grief and so much fear, I can't think of anything more subversive than each and every one of us loudly and proudly cheering on some joy. For my prayer this morning, I actually want to share with you a queering of Psalm 23, which is from Reverend M. Barclay, shared in a group called Infleshed. Will you enter into a spirit of prayer with me? Queer love is my divine companion, In their company, I unfurl with delight. They teach me to question the assumed and the rigid. They lure me with eros, creative and promiscuous. They fill me with the spirit of Stonewall and lead me in the ways of no pride for some of us without liberation for all of us. Even as systems threaten and forces oppress, I will forever act up, for silence is death, and in our holy provocation, you are always with us. You embrace us as chosen family, a comfort in our grief. You celebrate all that nurtures our aliveness in the presence of doctrines and policies that deaden. You bless every trans body. You declare sacred every sexuality. Life overflows with possibilities for becoming. Surely the glory of the peculiar, the outcast, the righteous freaks and weirdos will inspire me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell among the thresholds where the sacred strange subverts every normalized terror, and the queers of all ilk fight for the right to grow old. Amen.